this is being touted as something brand new and unprecedented by the government. But actually, just in November of last year, so less than a year ago, Suella Braverman went to France and met with her counterpart and signed a lucrative deal for the French to increase payments to £70 million per year, for them to build more fences and patrol more beaches and so on. And that's actually just the latest in a long line of such deals. So basically every Home Secretary, and we've had about 7 or 8 under the Conservative governments that we've had recently, each one of them goes at least once to France and signs a deal. And they tell us that this is the deal that's going to stop the refugees who are trying to come and seek sanctuary on our shores from being able to make that journey. And the truth is, the French are laughing, aren't they? I mean, I don't think this is as much of a diplomatic coup for Sunak as it's being painted as. £500 million, when we have up and down the country, people dying or coming to serious harm while they wait for an ambulance to show up that doesn't have the resources to reach them on time. We have the money to throw more of it. I mean, we might as well pour it into the channel. This deterrence approach does not work. People are desperate and they are always going to move. We know that's the case. This has been the same old story for years and years, for decades even. We need an approach that, just as Starmer promised those kids, we need an approach that gives people safe alternative ways to travel to the UK, because otherwise they'll keep taking these boats. And we know that no matter how much money we funnel into the French detention budget or enforcement budget, instead of funneling that into our communities who need it, it's still going to continue.
As you say, £500 million package announced yesterday from the UK to try and tackle this issue in partnership with France. But they also talked about funding a detention centre in northern France to try and stem these small boat crossings. What do you make of that decision to open this detention centre?
Well, there's two sides to that. So on the one hand, there's the simple inhumanity of the situation where two of the world's richest countries have a few thousand people trapped in limbo at their border, and their only solution to that is to propose to lock them up. That is disgraceful and it shames us all. But on the other hand, let's be realistic, that's not going to work either. For a start, this particular detention centre that for some reason we're funding the French to run will only become operational according to the fine print of this deal and around the end of 2026. But even when it does become operational, it's not going to have any impact on this issue specifically, because thankfully, under the law in both the UK and in France and in all democratic countries, you can't just round people up and lock them up and keep them detained indefinitely because it would be politically convenient for them to disappear. That's not how it works. So you're not allowed to detain somebody in the UK or in France unless you have a realistic prospect of removing them within a very strict time frame. And in France, we have a strict time frame. Actually, in the UK, we allow for indefinite detention, which is another huge abuse of human rights. But nonetheless, in France, they won't be able to detain these people because we know they're like the refugee that you showed just before this section, Arvin, who's coming with his family from Iran. They are people who are fleeing from dangerous countries, and so they cannot legally be returned to those countries and therefore cannot be detained. As I say, you can't just lock people up for political convenience, not in a democracy. This is like foul dictatorship type of insinuation that we're getting here from this deal, but it obviously won't actually have that impact, or at least I would very much hope not, and I think decent people would very much hope not. So once again, that's not a solution. The real solution is giving people safe alternatives to come to the UK if that's where they believe they'll be safest, and to rebuild their lives here.
Yeah, and many might say that they are simply locking the wrong people up. Are the French and British authorities being outsmarted by people smugglers?
Yes, they are, but all around the world we're being outsmarted by people smugglers, because as long as we have border systems that are tightly closed to people who don't have the specific paperwork we require, and this exists all around the world. So we only give visas to people who have very, globally speaking, huge advantages. So whether that's very high qualifications, very high salaries, we don't give visas, the paperwork that you need to cross a border. We in the UK don't, and around the world we don't, and the French don't. We don't give visas to people who are fleeing from persecution, who are poor and desperate and destitute, people who've been impacted by climate catastrophe, people who've been impacted by persecution, live in under dictatorships, or live in countries where it's unsafe to be gay, live in countries where all of these things happen to them. We don't give those people visas. And as long as we don't, and as long as we try to enforce brutal closed borders, there will be a market for smugglers, because human beings have hope. Human beings move. They move from where they can't live to where they can live. That's what we do. That's what we've always done, and it's what we always will do. None of these deals is ever going to stop that. So we need to manage it humanely, and until we do, well, the alternative are these smugglers.
OK, Zoe Gardner, it's been great to get your views on this today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.